In the early 17th century, Europe was fracturing. The 30 Years' War was tearing the continent apart, while inside the universities, scholars clung to strict, unyielding Aristotelian dogma. It was here, at the prestigious Jesuit College of La Flèche, that a young, sickly student named René Descartes spent his mornings resting in bed. In that quiet isolation, he began to realize a problem with the very foundation of his education. Everything he was being taught ultimately relied on ancient traditions and human senses. But traditions clash, and our senses routinely deceive us. An object in the distance looks small, a straight stick in water looks bent. Unwilling to build his life on assumptions, he walked away from the safe, respectable legal career his family expected. Instead, he enlisted in the military, looking for hard truths in what he called the great book of the world. With the intellectual authority of his era collapsing all around him, Descartes saw only one way forward. Before he could trust any theory about how the universe worked, he needed a foundation for knowledge that was indestructible. That search found its focus in 1618. While stationed as a soldier in the Dutch city of Breda, Descartes crossed paths with the polymath Isaac Beeckman. Beeckman introduced him to physico-mathematics, the radical idea that the physical world is governed by strict, calculable laws, rather than abstract spiritual forms. Descartes immediately pivoted his studies, committing to the creation of a universal mechanical science. But an ambition that large requires isolation. During a bitter winter in Neuburg, Descartes locked himself in an oven-heated room to escape the freezing cold and confront the paralysis of his own skepticism. Over a single night, he experienced 3 feverish dreams. He interpreted these vivid visions as a direct mandate to unify all human knowledge through a single mathematical method. To build this flawless mechanical system, he had to clear the site completely. He resolved to willingly destroy every single belief he had ever accepted as true. He called this tool hyperbolic doubt. The rule was strict. If a belief could possibly be doubted, even a little, he would treat it as absolutely false. He systematically stripped away reality. Because we cannot definitively prove we aren't dreaming, all physical sensations were discarded. To push it further, he imagined a supreme evil demon actively deceiving his mind, rendering even basic math untrustworthy. This left him in a complete intellectual void. With his own body and the external world erased, there was absolutely nothing left to hold on to. Yet, in the middle of that void, a single intuition survived. To be deceived, there must be a mind experiencing the deception. I think, therefore I am. By dismantling every certainty, he uncovered an absolute bedrock. This rock bottom provided the first secure point for constructing a system of modern rational thought. For centuries, critics have attacked this logic. They accuse him of the Cartesian circle, using a perfect God to validate his reasoning, while using his reasoning to prove that God exists. But this criticism misses the nature of his work. His famous meditations were never intended as universal dogmas. They were a deeply intimate confession of how one man dragged his own mind out of madness. Descartes relied on personal provability. As you see in this logic structure, he isolated the fact of his own existence, drawing a secure boundary around what was clearly and distinctly evident to his own reason. The only alternative was permanent, paralyzing doubt. By trusting his own internal logic, he could expand the framework outward. He deduced the existence of a non-deceiving creator, which in turn gave him the confidence to trust his mathematical proofs. He wasn't trying to dictate objective truth to the rest of the world. He was programming a custom intellectual operating system, one necessary for his own mind to survive the terror of radical skepticism. With his internal logic secured, Descartes turned outward to build a clockwork model of the physical cosmos. He proposed the plenum, a universe packed entirely with continuous matter where a physical vacuum is impossible. This sketch shows his physical framework, the vortex theory. He argued that the heavens are filled with concentric circles of invisible ether, forming cosmic whirlpools that physically drag the planets around the sun. Notice where these borders meet. By having ether particles physically collide and transfer force, Descartes could explain planetary motion and gravity through direct mechanical contact, entirely removing any mysterious forces acting at a distance. He spent years assembling this system into a masterwork called The World. But just as it was ready for the public, chilling news arrived. The Italian Inquisition had brutally condemned Galileo for supporting a sun-centered universe. Cautious by nature, Descartes locked his manuscript away. He suppressed his own cosmological masterpiece, prioritizing the quiet, steady pursuit of truth over the risk of public martyrdom. 4 years later, he made a careful re-entry into the public sphere. He anonymously published this document in 1637, the Discourse on the Method, framing it as a picture of his own mind for readers to judge. Looking at the subtitle, you can see the attached essays that demonstrate its power: dioptrics, meteors, and geometry. That final appendix contained his crowning achievement. He introduced analytic geometry, the revolutionary tool that fused abstract algebra with physical space. By presenting his ideas as a personal tool rather than an absolute edict, he successfully bypassed the rigid censors of the 17th century and delivered a mathematical revolution. His specific physical theories, like the cosmic vortices, would eventually be dismantled entirely and replaced by Newtonian physics. Yet his underlying premise survived intact. He established that the universe operates as a predictable, mechanical system, devoid of supernatural interference and governed by laws we can calculate. He provided humanity with the tools to ruthlessly question tradition, pairing that skepticism with a mathematical method to verify truth independently. Descartes replaced institutional dogma with a system of individual inquiry, navigating the absolute terror of the unknown through meticulous, step-by-step reasoning. In the 17th century, René Descartes set out to establish a completely unshakable foundation for the sciences. He recognized that the existing structures of knowledge were built on unstable assumptions, and he wanted absolute certainty. To find that certainty, he deployed methodological doubt. Rather than examining every single belief he held, he acted as an epistemic bulldozer, striking directly at the foundations of how human beings acquire knowledge. The first level of his demolition targets sensory perception. From a distance, a square tower might look round, or a straight stick submerged in water appears bent. Vision is a physiological process, entirely vulnerable to physical distortion and error. If the senses deceive us even occasionally, they cannot serve as the bedrock of truth. Descartes then moves to the second level, the dream argument. When you dream, the environments you experience feel entirely real until you wake up. There is no definitive, logical test to distinguish the experience of waking reality from a vivid, subconscious illusion. Descartes then asks us to imagine a thought experiment, an evil genius, a deus deceptor. This is an all-powerful, malicious entity dedicated entirely to deception, capable of manipulating the very fabric of our thoughts. Under the influence of this evil genius, even the most self-evident mathematical truths are compromised. You might feel absolute certainty that 2 + 3 = 5, but that certainty could simply be a glitch programmed into your mind by a deceiving demon. If the mind can be hijacked at its core by a malicious force, then reality itself is compromised. By the end of this exercise, human consciousness is left completely unmoored in an epistemological void. Descartes pictures himself sitting alone by the fire. He has stripped away his belief in the physical world, the existence of the universe, and even his own body. In this total vacuum, he arrives at a singular breakthrough. If an evil demon is actively deceiving him, there must inherently be an I that exists to experience the deception. The act of doubting proves the existence of the doubter. Many recognize his early attempt to express this from the Discourse on Method. I think, therefore I am. However, the word therefore implies a logical argument. A syllogism requires a preceding premise. Everything that thinks exists, which remains vulnerable to the demon hypothesis. In his later meditations, he refines this into a bulletproof formulation. Ego sum, ego existo. I am, I exist. This is not an inference, but a direct, non-inferential intuition that requires no prior logic to be true. This surviving entity is the res cogitans. Descartes defines it strictly as a thinking thing. It has no spatial extension, no shape, and is entirely divorced from the physical body. By isolating the self as his Archimedean point, Descartes proves that human consciousness is the one indestructible truth surviving in a universe of potential illusions. Descartes has secured his own mind, but he now faces the trap of solipsism. He knows he exists, but he is trapped entirely inside his own intellect, unable to trust anything in the external world.
To escape this trap, he has to establish a bridge back to reality. He must logically prove the existence of a perfect, non-deceiving God to serve as the guarantor of his rational faculties. He begins with the causal adequacy principle. A cause must contain at least as much reality as its effect. Because the human mind is finite, it lacks the necessary reality to invent the concept of an infinite God from nothing. He formulates this as the trademark argument. The idea of the infinite is so far beyond human capacity that it must have been stamped into the human intellect by the Creator at the moment of inception. He reinforces this with the ontological proof, comparing the definition of God to an immutable geometric law. Just as a triangle must inherently have three sides to be a triangle, actual existence is an inseparable property of absolute perfection. To conceive of a perfect being that does not exist is a logical contradiction.
Securing the divine guarantee provides the crucial intellectual bridge out of solipsism. With a non-deceiving God validating the clarity of human reason, Descartes can safely begin to reconstruct the external world. However, the philosopher Antoine Arnauld soon presented a devastating critique that threatens to collapse this newly rebuilt philosophical system. This diagram illustrates Arnaud's paradox. Descartes claims we only know our perceptions are true because a non-deceiving God exists. But here's the problem. Descartes only knows God exists because he perceives the proofs of God. The reasoning relies on the very thing it's trying to prove. Descartes defends his system by shifting the focus to human memory. He argues that the divine guarantee is only required to validate remembered truths, conclusions we have drawn but are no longer actively examining. In the exact active moment of intense intuition, the truth is self-evident. It requires no external guarantee. The immediate presence of the thought breaks the trap. Navigating the Cartesian circle transforms doubt from a paralyzing paradox into a rigorously structured engine for validating human memory and enabling sustained scientific inquiry. One final contradiction lingers. If a perfect creator guarantees our rational faculties, why is humanity so universally prone to making mistakes? Descartes addresses this through a psychological theodicy, separating the human mind into two distinct faculties, the intellect and the will. The human intellect has inherent limits. We are finite beings, capable of clearly and distinctly understanding only a very small fraction of reality. Contrast this with human free will, which is infinite. It is the capacity to choose, to affirm, or to deny absolutely anything, without any boundaries. The precise mechanism of error lies in the friction between these two faculties. Mistakes happen when our infinite will leaps blindly past the boundaries of our limited understanding, affirming things we do not clearly perceive. Descartes leaves us with a severe warning. True knowledge requires absolute epistemic discipline, as human error becomes the heavy price we pay for the gift of an infinite free will. René Descartes sought to map the modern rational universe by dividing all of existence into two neat categories. He proposed substance dualism, the strict split between the conscious, immaterial mind and the mechanical, material body. In 1643, Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, a brilliant thinker living in political exile, analyzed his work and spotted a massive contradiction. She pointed out a basic mechanical reality. To push an object, you must make physical contact, and to make contact, you must occupy physical space. Descartes had defined the soul as strictly immaterial. If the mind takes up no space, it cannot physically push the body to move. This single observation exposed a logical void right at the center of human consciousness. For Descartes, The mind-body problem was an existential threat to his entire philosophical architecture. He needed an immediate fix. He scrambled for a biological mechanism, eventually publishing The Passions of the Soul. He grounded his answer here, isolating the pineal gland, a singular organ in the brain. He theorized the body operated by animal spirits, streams of air traveling down nerves to inflate muscles. The soul tilted this gland, redirecting spirits to move limbs. Critics immediately spotted the oversight. The pineal gland is an organ made of physical matter. To physically tilt it, the soul would still need to make contact, requiring the exact same spatial extension as moving an arm. Attempting to patch a metaphysical impossibility with a biological organ was a logical non-starter. The dualistic system remained broken. Unable to solve the physics of the mind-body union, Descartes pivoted to managing the human experience of it. He developed a moral philosophy centered around his chief ethical virtue, which he called generosity. Generosity relies on recognizing our free will. He argued that the will is the one truly immaterial faculty we have absolute control over. By exercising that will, a person can master their reactions to physical passions. We might not understand the mechanics of the body, but we can still mentally regulate its inputs to achieve contentment. It provided a functional framework for daily living. Yet, by relying on ethics, Descartes quietly retreated from explaining the actual mechanics of human consciousness. His writings on passions and ethics caught the attention of Queen Christina of Sweden, who summoned him to the freezing court of Stockholm in 1649. Descartes was a lifelong late riser with a fragile constitution. Forced into brutal tutoring sessions in drafty castles at 5 in the morning, the physical strain overwhelmed him. He contracted pneumonia, dying in February 1650. Europe's greatest theorist of the immaterial mind was ultimately defeated by the harsh, inescapable reality of his material body. Descartes was buried in exile, and his writings were quickly placed on the index of prohibited books. The next generation of philosophers inherited a fractured reality. They accepted his strict division of mind and body, but discarded the impossible pineal gland theory. To fix the paradox, Nicolas Malebranche developed a strict workaround called occasionalism. Here, mind and body never touch. Instead, God acts as the sole causal agent, moving your arm on the exact occasion your mind forms the thought to raise it. Others went to different extremes. Spinoza collapsed mind and matter into a single unified substance, while Leibniz argued they were two separate systems wound to run in pre-established harmony. Today, we map biological neural pathways and train digital networks, yet we still struggle to bridge the divide between physical matter and subjective experience. Descartes never delivered the answer to human consciousness. He permanently defined the boundaries of an impossible problem we are still trying to solve.